You can have very powerful creative forces in this town, like movements of art, music, whatever. You can have these movements. So the thing about Washington is that it's a petri dish for great ideas. They may not be sustainable, but you can always grow something here because nobody's looking.
DC is a small city of 400, 500,000 people. The industry is government, if there is one.
So what happens in institutions, you get these little cracks, and like the people who can escape are able to do really interesting things.
We're proud as hell of the fact that what's coming out of this town is good. You know, which when you think about, you know, what kind of a town Washington, D.C. was at that point, that was kind of a remarkable thing. And we knew it. Everyone knew it.
I think that the isolation breeds individuality.
I think you already know what this song's about.
I felt really like threatened by it. I loved rock and roll and felt like their music, this music punk stuff was just ridiculous. But mostly it just was intimidating and weird. And I remember going to parties and then hearing, you know, Iggy Pop, you know, Lust for Life or a Ramones song or whatever, and you start to think like, what is this music? And just, you know, spending some time in pointless debates with other friends about it, which is what largely I think you do when you're 16, 17 years old. I borrowed some records and my mind got changed.
But when I heard the Ramones, and I couldn't understand why anyone would make a record that sounded so sonically bad. Because I was used to ELO and the Bee Gees on the radio and Stevie Wonder, you know, where it's just sonically pristine. But the Ramones are going for a raw, lo-fi thing, which I didn't quite understand. So I listened to both sides of the record, and then I found myself putting it right back on again. And there's one song, I Don't Want to Go Down to the Basement. I was like, oh, yeah. Because a family member of mine used to lock me in a basement.
The Cramps played this show down at Georgetown University at the Hall of Nations. And that was the night I was like, cut my hair. That was it. And there's actually a point in the show where Lux vomited on stage. And I mean a huge amount of vomit. They left the stage and some people came out, these mops and like paper towels, and they came back out and played some more.
When we found something that was way harder and spoke to us really directly and was antithetical to hippie, we were all into that.
Put me down, But everybody was in it together. There was no categories. We were all punk or hardcore punk, and there wasn't any oi, or it was just, we're all, you know, there wasn't very many of us, so we kind of had to stick together. It was like the island of misfit toys with all the weirdos, and it was like, you know, all the smart kids, and, you know, most people were pretty smart that were into it. We all found each other through hook or by crook, or, you know.
It was the most important thing to you was the people around you. And we were this little pocket that would protect it against the outside world.
The main band, at least for us, me and my friends, was the Bad Brains. It's the most amazing stuff we'd ever seen. Never seen a band play like that.
A black punk rock band. Like, cool!
I remember seeing them at the Hard Art Show on 15th Street, and the way that show felt, and like the potential that was in that room, just the euphoria of the event, and like the idea that we're like, look, we're all doing this together, and it was like this incredible, like, you know, energetic, transformative experience.
It was like all these young Caucasian city kids were completely inspired by an African-American band that was sort of employing soul and reggae into their punk rock. And just that sort of spiritual swing of the Bad Brains, knowing their reggae and knowing their R&B and their soul, would be something that would inspire and influence these bands who really didn't have that sort of cultural background.
Bad Brains are one of the most influential bands of my life.
Early on, it was such a tight-knit community, it was such a tight-knit fraternity, and everybody looked out for each other.
Okay, I found this vehicle of expression that I adore, and now I'm separated from my friends, you know, in one direction, and now the whole world also wants to have a fight with me, you know, and we're little, and we're not fighters, you know, we're the sensitive boys, putting on this armor.
We were always in Georgetown because some of us worked there. I would say most of us. And then, but when you weren't working, there was nothing else to do. So you just hang out, wander around, and go to the same bunch of record stores, and then go sit in front of the 7-Eleven.
It was like this strip. Like all the suburban kids would drive their cars up and down, like M in Wisconsin, and it was just, you know, just crawling and yelling out the windows and so forth.
And there was legitimate threats. You know, there was not very many of us. Sort of immediately reviled by just about any kind of segment of society.
I got my ass kicked by 3 guys who were probably in their mid-30s. Grown men, so obviously grown men, you know what I mean, kicked the fuck out of a teenage kid, and this was every fucking day.
This redneck guy is walking down the street and he sees us and he's like, so what the, you know, what's up with that? What are you guys doing? Blah, blah, blah. And, you know, we're terrified.
In the late 70s, there was a uniformity in sort of the way people presented themselves visually. There's a uniformity in the way people behaved or acted, or the music they listened to, or the way they navigated the trajectory of life. And if you were to step off of that pattern, to look different or whatever, was to immediately set yourself up as the enemy.
Because it really started getting into a thing where within 2 or 3 blocks, Some sports car drives by with some eagle on the hood with an 8-track tape of Boston blaring or Kansas or whatever. And someone's mouthing off and you just have to go like, okay. But the car's pulling over and these guys are getting out and they're hyperventilating. They're like you threw an egg at them or something, like you've called them out. Just your appearance has questioned their masculinity and now they have to confront you.
And I remember this one day, we were walking through Georgetown, and we were at the very beginning of Georgetown. We stopped in Haagen-Dazs, where Henry Rollins worked. And he's like, well, hey, it's been getting kind of weird lately. Like, if you need to run in here, if somebody's like chasing or anything, feel free to like come in, I got your back. And we're like, that's really cool, because Henry's big and scary. And yeah, that's awesome, because that would be really helpful. And we went down the street, and Ian was working over at Georgetown Theater, you know, and said the same thing, like, hey, if you ever need any help, just swing by. And then we went to a record store that we used to always go to, Penguin Feather, and Danny Ingram, one of the older guys that we actually kind of knew, said the same thing. And we were I just remember that day feeling so relieved. They're like, okay, there's some people who kind of have our back, because it was intimidating, you know.
You know, older white guys and Camaros who would just jump out on you and they'd beat you up, and then they'd say, we're the punk beaters and we're gonna be back tomorrow. We're gonna find you, we're gonna get you, you know. And
so we thought, okay, we need to deal with this. So a bunch of us got together, and Alec at the time was 14 maybe, maybe 15, and he had bright bleached hair and very, you know, decidedly punk looking. So we had him go like a block ahead of us, or half a block ahead of us, and there was like 8 or 10 of us just walking behind him, hoping that he would draw out. We just walked for hours looking for those guys.
And you just got good at hauling off and hitting someone. Because I wasn't really born and raised to do this. I'm a guy from Northwest. I went to private school. This really isn't part of my metabolism, but it became it.
The turning point for me was when The Clash played at the Ontario Theatre. And I got to go backstage afterwards, and I was hanging out with Joe Strummer and Mick Jones and Paul Simon. We were all sitting upstairs at the Ontario Theatre, and we're talking. And Joe Strummer said, oh man, you gotta get in the band, you know, man, you gotta get off the sidelines and do something, you gotta be a part of it.
There was this mythos then that in order to be in a band, you had to be like Jaco Pastorius or something. And rejection of that was a big part of what created the DC scene.